going on, guys? It is Bearson here, back again with another weekly movie ranking. I honestly think this is the third or fourth week that we've done this, and I think it's going pretty well. I enjoy, honestly, getting to talk about movies that I may have not been able to talk about, unless if I've done this series. So I have enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed it as well. So this week I had watched 6 films. I have one really bad film in my opinion, and then the rest are quite good. So I do have some good movies to talk about this week, but let's get right into it with our last place spot. Coming in at our 6th or last place spot, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, before I even watched this movie, I kind of knew that it was most likely going to be last on my weekly ranking. Now, I went and got this movie at Walmart, just picked it up out of the $5 Blu-ray bin when I was picking up another movie that I watched this week that we'll get to later. And I kind of just thought, you know what, this might be a fun little movie to watch and turn my brain off. But it was all but that. Some movies are so bad that they're still kind of enjoyable to watch. This movie was just bad. From the acting to the writing to the character design, I really didn't like anything about this movie. This is a Nickelodeon movie, so you think it would be designed for kids, but there's almost so much sexualized humor in this movie, and the turtles are almost scary to look at. I mean, they're turtles. You would think they would look cute and not like these big green ninja monsters. They're absolutely terrifying to look at. And Master Splinter is the worst of all. He's just this big mutant rat, and it looks terrifying. But the writing and the acting in this movie is just absolutely awful. And I don't know what I was expecting when I was watching this movie, and I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes right beforehand, and I saw 22%, but I still had a little bit of hope for it because I remember playing the old Ninja Turtle games on my PlayStation 2, so I was like, you know what, maybe I would have some nostalgia for this movie, and that just wasn't the case. This movie was definitely the worst movie I watched this week. Coming in at our 5th place spot, though, I have Zombieland. Now, from our last place spot to our next to last place spot, there is a huge step up in quality, in my opinion, because the rest of these movies I quite like. Zombieland is a pretty short movie. It actually doesn't even clock in at an hour and a half. So this was the movie that I actually ended up watching that almost was like, you know what, turn off my brain and just enjoy it. This movie is pretty funny. I think it is almost a satirical film to horror and zombie movies because it just plays it up way over the top. I think there's some pretty decent themes of character change and character development, especially with Tallahassee's character, as you see that he is this broken man and he just really is almost this guy who kills a ton of zombies, but it's because he has lost his son. And then you have the main character in Columbus, who reminds me a lot of myself. He's just this small little nerdy character. But this movie is just a fun watch. If you haven't seen it, I definitely encourage you to watch it. I really want to pick up Zombieland 2 Double Tap and watch that film as well, because I really enjoy this film, even though it is next to last on this week's ranking. Coming in at our 4th place spot, though, I have How to Train Your Dragon 2. Now, I know I just reviewed this series yesterday in a video, but I still have to rank it in this series. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised that it is coming in this low. I really enjoyed this movie, and again, like I said yesterday, for much of me watching the third movie, which I'll get to here in a little bit, I thought this movie was going to be just a little bit better. But I think the third act of that third movie really just pushed it over the top. But this movie is still a quite enjoyable movie to watch. I really like the emotional impacted scenes in this movie. I think it might be the best throughout the entire trilogy when it comes to the loss of Hiccup's father and his father reuniting with his mother. I think those are some really impactful scenes. And like I said yesterday, this movie out of the entire trilogy feels the most epic and just over the top. And I think that's what you need from your middle movie in a trilogy, because this is supposed to be your climax movie. And when this movie introduced the alpha dragons and just these dragons that have the power to almost rule above all the other dragons, I think that was a really cool dynamic that this movie plays up to, and I really enjoyed this movie, and it comes in at our number 4 spot. Coming in at 3rd place, though, I have 1917. And before y'all spam your keyboards and say, you know what, this movie is awesome, I'm not saying it isn't. And honestly, if I watch it a second time, it might rank higher on this list. But the reason why I have it so low is because honestly, this movie was possibly the most disappointing, besides Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that I watched this week. And that's just because I had such high standards for it. Hearing about this movie, I hadn't watched it before, I wasn't able to watch it in the theaters. But just hearing about this movie and how it was a Best Picture nominee and the directing was amazing and all these other things, I was really looking forward to watching this movie. However, again, I was slightly disappointed. And if this was a list of ranking the atmosphere and the directing and just the scenery of a movie, this movie would probably come number one every single time, because the directing in this movie and the way these scenes are shot is absolutely amazing. I don't think I've seen, except for possibly Birdman, a better one-shot film. And again, both of these movies can kind of be debated if they're truly one-shot. But this movie feels like more of a one-shot film and just a whole journey in its own than Birdman. But besides that, the way I feel like this movie disappoints me is, again, on the level of writing, character development, and story. And I know this is a war movie, so of course the main plot of the movie is war. And I felt like it was a very interesting war film because it almost was a race against time rather than just a guns a-blazing movie, and I did enjoy that. It kept me on the edge of my seat. But I feel like our characters really didn't get a lot of, character moments. I feel like one of the best lines of the movie was delivered very early on before they even left on their journey, where I think it was one of their sergeants says, "Hey, guess what? No widow loves anything more than ribbons," or it was something like that. And I thought that was very powerful. But the rest of the movie, honestly, when it comes to characters and just plot build-up and character development, I honestly would have to say it's rather weak. But this movie is still a great movie. If you haven't seen it, just for the direction's sake, I would go ahead and give it a watch. I do want to watch this movie a second time though, and just after seeing it and my standards actually being set, I want to see how much I actually like this movie rewatching it. I think I might like it just a little bit more. But it comes in at our number 3 spot this week. Coming in at our number 2 spot, though, is How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, or How to Train Your Dragon 3. And again, I know I just talked about this movie yesterday, but this movie is very good, and it all comes down to the last act. I feel like this movie almost wraps up a trilogy almost as good as any, because I think this last act in this movie almost rewards the viewer almost so much that it just makes you feel happy inside. And I really like that when it ends off a trilogy like this. I do have my problems though with it in the first and second act. I talked about that yesterday, where I feel like this movie just takes too much time focusing on Toothless and his relationship with the Bright Fury. But I do feel like this movie has the best villain in the entire trilogy. I feel like he's a very interesting character. He has a lot of personality, and he's just a cool character to watch. He's not as menacing as the villain in How to Train Your Dragon 2, but he definitely got a lot more character development than he did. So this movie comes in at my number 2 spot, just missing out for this week's number 1. Coming in at our number 1 spot, though, it is The Greatest Showman. Now, if you know me personally, you know I am not a huge fan of musicals. I don't really enjoy how they kind of just break out into songs, when in reality no one would break out into songs like that, and I understand that's the point. It's just not my cup of tea. But this movie is the one exception, because I feel like this movie works in the songs with the story and its writing, and it just works. And the songs are so good. You have songs that sound epic and just get you pumped up at the beginning of the movie, like The Greatest Show, but then you also have songs that just make you feel something and just bring this emotion out of you. Songs like A Million Dreams and Rewrite the Stars. And this movie almost is like the S-tier standard for musicals, because it just doesn't add music where it seems like music needs to be added. No, it's almost like, we wrote a script and then wrote songs to go along with it, and the music actually progresses the story rather than just being like, our story needs to come to a halt so we can have this musical number. And this movie doesn't drag. Again, it's not super long. It doesn't even come in at 2 hours, but the feeling that this movie can draw, and I feel like when your movie can do music well, it can draw more emotion out of you than anything. And when this movie looks at the rise of P.T. Barnum and then the fall of P.T. Barnum, and again, it does it all through music and numbers of music. It is so well written. It is so well performed. Hugh Jackman kills it in this movie. I think this was a great role to follow up Wolverine in, and it's honestly just funny to see. But this movie is absolutely amazing. It is the one musical I really do enjoy, and it comes in at our number 1 spot for this week. Alright, y'all, that is it for this week's ranking. Again, if you have seen any of these movies, feel free to leave your ranking in the comments down below. Again, I feel like this list may have been the most controversial just because of where I have 1917. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.